Radio Rahim here with the legendary, iconic, very good friend, Gareth A Davies. Spent quite a few years in this business together. We don't get to have these chats very often, and this is a sad occasion that brings us together, but I am happy to see your face at the end of the year and know that you're doing well. How are you, Gareth?
Very well indeed, Radio Rahim. Thank you, and a very soon, very happy New Year to you, and a very Merry Christmas, like you say. But a very sad moment for the boxing world over the last 24 hours, as you mentioned.
I'd like to offer you the start, really, as I'm not a British citizen. However, I do feel at home in the United Kingdom, and I felt welcomed by yourself and the boxing community at large here for over a decade now. The first fight I ever covered was Joshua White in the United Kingdom, London to be exact. And obviously, you were present for that and for many more behind it. So, allow me to offer you the floor just to introduce what a moment like this feels like for the country that has brought Anthony Joshua to the pinnacle of stardom and really is represented by him globally.
Well, Anthony Joshua is an enormous crossover star and has been since he registered with the British public in their hearts and their minds in 2012 at the London Olympics by winning the super heavyweight gold medal. You can't become a bigger sports star in the UK than winning a gold medal in your home Olympics. It projected him, even though he'd started to emerge within the sport as a silver medalist at the World Amateur Championships the year before. You cannot register yourself as a bigger star than complete that in your home city. So from 2012 onwards, from the summer of 2012, Anthony Joshua became a beacon for a new era in boxing, not only as a champion, but as a heavyweight champion. He, with Eddie Hearn and Sky Box Office, they became a machine in terms of driving the resonance of boxing in the UK. So Anthony Joshua appeared on chat shows, crossed over as a celebrity, a fighter, without being a celebrity type of person, a very respected and loved person in the British Isles. Notwithstanding that, some criticism of how good would he be, how good could he be, is he a Hall of Famer? You hear all these things. Everyone wants a piece of Anthony Joshua. Now, in the last 7 or 8 years, the fight with Vladimir Klitschko, you mentioned the fight with Dillian Whyte, that was part of his building process just before he became a world champion. Once he became a world champion, he was the destroyer. He made boxing very popular with the crossover fans from other sports. He made couples go for a night out to go and see him box. He's adored by women. He's an Adonis physically. He's great to deal with. He's always been a gentleman. I mean, I just did a post-fight interview after the Jake Paul fight with him in Miami, where he was fantastic with me and an absolute class act in an event where he got criticised in some ways for taking. His Vladimir Klitschko fight crossed over into all the front, middle and back of newspapers, radio reports, television reports, and was an enormous event. Everyone awaits his fight with Tyson Fury next year, that it happens. And so, and I have to say this personally as well, Rahim, just to finish, because I've been on that road from Lagos to Ibadan, because my parents lived and worked in Nigeria for a while. And I was very touched tragically when I was called by several outlets yesterday. It was the evening here in the Far East, and it was almost unbelievable to hear what had happened and to see some images of Anthony climbing out of a vehicle in pain, and then to hear, because I contacted his management team, that Kevin Ayodele and Sina, Ghami, two of his close associates with his training team, and I don't know them intimately. They're very quiet men. They're not out there and talking to everyone. Absolutely devastated to hear that he'd lost two of his very close aides, if you like. And it's terrible tragedy to strike at this time of year. It's always a tragedy for the family. I have condolences to them. And yesterday, it was a massive news story in the UK, and it will continue to be so. That's my assessment of Anthony and what has happened.
At the risk of sounding as if, and thank God that we are not eulogizing Anthony Joshua, I'm happy to hear you lay down the groundwork of who this man is and what he's meant thus far to the sport and to the country. And it's my perspective comes from one of an American citizen who had been covering boxing for the entirety of my adult life. I started covering boxing when I was a teenager. And while I'm well traveled because of the sport, to be honest, before I came to cover Anthony Joshua in the United Kingdom, American journalists and the way that we viewed boxing really as a platform globally, all was about American fighters or global fighters who came to America to make it on American platforms. That was the hub. We didn't really see a need to travel outside the country very often. I mean, maybe the Klitschko days you'd go to, Germany and such, but
Yeah,
that was an anomaly. So just the fact that my international coverage truly began because of the rise of Anthony Joshua's stardom is a testament to what he's done for the boxing world in the way of being the ambassador for the United Kingdom. I didn't know how big a star he was when I arrived. It was down to seconds out, and Robert Waterman say, "Hey, you need to come over cover this guy. This is a big fight. We'll read you in on what's going on in the the narrative, if you will." And so that was the first day I landed. Really, was the day we met. We had that interview. I met Dylan White the same. We were at Miguel's same week. All these things that are now part and parcel of my daily life, really, were
yeah,
introduced to me at that fight. You cannot overstate for those who are not in the United Kingdom or weren't there, especially at Joshua's pinnacle, how big a celebrity and star he really was. I was just watching the Four Kings last night, and they were talking about Frank Bruno and his level of stardom, but I'd never seen anything like this in boxing outside of the United States. Anthony Joshua, I like to say, he was the Elvis of boxing. The man is everywhere. He was the great ambassador. He was the poster child. He was able to articulate. He's a good guy, all the stuff. Dylan liked to take the Mickey out of him and try to take the shine off the apple. All of that rivalry was there. But most important for me was that because of what he was accomplishing, I believe that was the beginning of the transfer of the hub of boxing from America to the United Kingdom. Little did we know at the time that what was underway, but indeed, in fact, it was. And so you mentioned the Klitschko fight. Well, you might recall that you and I did a bit on William Hill before
we
that fight.
did. We did. Yeah,
It
correct.
might be the my most favorite pre-fight analysis video I've ever done, or I think it was an audio that we did, because I felt welcomed. I knew what I was talking about. Working with you helped me level up, and you gave me context for the boxing community here. So now, and let me skip forward to just over a week ago when you see Joshua really making his true American debut with the Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul fight. That was his true introduction to the American audience, broader than boxing. They thought that might be the case with Andy Ruiz. We all know that that fight didn't go to plan, but however, it also really didn't make the kind of mark that Joshua could have even made then. He still looked the same. He's still the same charming guy. He's still an imposing figure. But this platform just now introduced him globally into the American market. What struck me when I got the call, and it's much the way you got it, different time of day, but equally shocking, was the roller coaster ride that this man now has to be on.
Yeah,
That's was one of the gentlemen who tragically lost his life in this car accident. We were together in Ghana with Joshua in June. I won't go so far to say we were great friends, but we were friends. We do communicate. We got to know each other on that very recent trip. and I'm painfully aware of how close Joshua is to both gentlemen who lost their lives and how difficult it must be for him in the wake of all this to have ridden the roller coaster emotionally of what's happened in the last week, the heights and the emotional damage that you would take by losing such a close couple of friends in the spotlight of the world. And so we had a little chat before we began about journalism as opposed to just prattling on maybe on the internet, as I've seen a lot do. I want to commend the British press in the wake of the Jake Paul fight for actually not taking the mickey out of Joshua. I thought they supported him, they backed him, they gave him the respect he deserves and didn't take cheap shots as they are somewhat known to do. And it was just then that it gave me such a better feeling about the press on this side of the pond and how you handle your stars. I think Joshua's experienced the depths and the heights of that. And in the wake of this, I just would like to ask you to speak about how the press views that roller coaster of highs and lows in Joshua's career. And in this moment, what is the appropriate way to address an issue like we face?
Well, I think some very interesting and germane points you make there in this moment, Rahim. That I think what I've noticed that obviously there were a kind of panoply of opinions about him fighting Jake Paul to take it back a week and a half. I mean, I was critical of that fight being signed first of all because I worried about the dangers for Jake Paul. He got his jaw broken at the end of the day, and kind of used the scars as a flag in his new moon. Delusionally optimistic in his words, as he is about these things. So Anthony Joshua went to America a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, played the role which he needed to play, was very classy throughout, played the B side, knew what he was doing, showed that. And to your point, in 2019, his big launch in America, because that was still the time when to make it in boxing as a big British name, you still had to make it in America. It was a catastrophic failure against Andy Ruiz, and it was catastrophe for him that night in boxing terms. He resonated again. I did a tiny little interview with him after the fight against Jake Paul for TalkSport. Millions and millions and millions of views. And you look in the comments, there's so many new fans. He conquered America a week and a half ago, in spite of the fact it was against Jake Paul, not a Deontay Wilder or an American star. He became a star in America last week, and I hope that continues for him. He became a star on Netflix, which made him an even bigger figure last week as well. It wouldn't surprise me on that point to see Netflix eventually show him and Tyson Fury. It just wouldn't surprise me at the moment. It just really would not surprise me, even though obviously they both with promoters who are contractually with DAZN. The British press, I think, to Anthony Joshua's credit, in the way he's carried himself in the public for 13 years since the Olympic Games, I think treat him with respect. I think you do see a kind of diaspora of opinions about the way I get critiqued for being a Tyson Fury fanboy, but anti Anthony Joshua. Not true at all. But there's this perception, and the reason for this is Anthony Joshua has always been very private when he's not working. He doesn't. He works, then he goes away and does his thing. And I think to bring it to the present day, I think the way the reporting was yesterday of what happened, obviously it's a tragic incident. 2 people have lost their lives. It's a horrific moment. I thought the reporting of it yesterday, I've read and obviously got in contact with his management team straight away. I thought the reporting of it was responsible, not speculative. The there was a reaching out to the Ogun State Police, the highways, the emergency services, and I don't feel like it was sensationalized yesterday, because it's clearly a horrific accident that's happened on a very dangerous stretch of road. So my reading of it is obviously there'll be more to come and there'll be more investigation into this. But at the moment, my feeling is this: as a long-standing journalist, it's very important not to speculate, which we see wild speculation on social media, and I think it's wrong, especially when people are grieving.
You talk about the reporting, and I'm glad you got to that because that is what is on my mind now that we've reached the actual trappings of the incident. We've both spent time in West Africa. You've spent time on that very road. I have
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Understanding, as only one who's been on a road in West Africa can, the chaos of that traffic dynamic. Now, again, I'm making assumptions based on other areas I've been in that region, but never on that road. But I assume they've got to be very much similar. When people hear the reports that the car was traveling at a high speed and was looking to overtake another vehicle, I take that with a grain of salt. And if I'm honest, I even look a bit more skeptically about even that report because the nature of the officials there would probably be to cover their own butt and make sure that this doesn't appear to be an incident that could have been avoided by a better structure of engineering, road engineering, or the way that traffic really does flow there, which is chaotic. I've never been on a road in West Africa where you didn't have to travel at something of a speed and kind of maneuver in and out of other vehicles just to get on your way. It isn't the kind of road you imagine if you've only been to the UK or America, where there's 2 lanes or 4 lanes of traffic, there's dotted lines, people are respecting those certain lanes. That's just not how traffic flows there. So I'm not comfortable in any sense with it appearing to be this narrative that is developing that, oh, the driver was at fault or he's made some dangerous maneuver. You have to put that in context. Without having seen video or knowing exactly the conditions, just out of my experience in the region, how you drive there is likely to be how Anthony Joshua was being driven on the day, right? And so I also want to, just as we are kind of doing an update, I'll lay out for you what I know factually, and maybe if there are holes missing that you can plug in, please offer more information. But the very simple information that as I understand it, is there were 4 people in the vehicle. The driver has survived. Anthony Joshua, sitting directly behind the driver, survived, and then the passenger, as they are on the right side of the car in Nigeria, to the left of both the driver and Anthony Joshua, that's Sina and Latif. Those were the 2 individuals who tragically passed away. That Joshua sustained no life-threatening injuries. He seemed to be able to walk away from the accident, at least under his own weight, and then received medical attention. Possibly, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that didn't receive it necessarily in the country, but was able to be flown someplace else and receive proper medical attention elsewhere. That's all I really know, or at least believe I know from a cascade of reports. Is there more?
yeah. I think there's some. It's reported that the vehicle was overtaking, and may have had a tire blowout, and which made it veer off the road, to hit a stationary lorry or a truck. Report a lorry or truck, as we would call it. And obviously, like you say, Joshua was in the back. I didn't know the driver had survived. I didn't know who the driver was. I heard that there was a security detail behind them as well in another vehicle. So the assumption is that it's crushed one side of the vehicle. Terribly dangerous moment. Road traffic accidents happen. That is a very dangerous stretch of road. It's known to be a dangerous stretch of road. When we travelled that road, and it is some years ago when my parents were working there, and I think it's about 70 miles from Lagos to Ibadan, which is like the tech heart commercial district one of the biggest rising cities in Africa. Very upwardly mobile place. Very significant in the 60s when Nigeria had its independence from the UK, because obviously it was a colony for a while. So we used to travel in Land Rovers, two Land Rovers, and I mean, it's not something that I think about when I can really even recall, but you're always careful when you're driving. You do overtake cars at times. You There is a different driving style in different places. I mean, when I get in a taxi in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and you've got to cross three or four lanes, I don't look, if I'm honest. I don't know if you've been in taxis in Saudi,
Of course.
but for me, it's one of the most dangerous places I've ever felt like I'm in a taxi. Yet they all do it. And I say to the guys sometimes, no Formula One today, please. No Formula One.
You
You
take your
know,
time. We'll get there when we get there.
yeah, and then woof, away they speed. So I'm not going to speculate on anything other than what's been reported, because these guys are very close friends. The two men who lost their lives have worked with Anthony for 10 years. As you say, they're very close friends, they're very close associates of him. They're not big, noisy figures after their own publicity in the boxing world. That's what I was trying to make points about earlier. It's a nod and a hello that I always have with them. I don't pry into Anthony's team unless I need to ask a specific question about training, about what nutritional regime he's been on. But I think that whole group around him always carry themselves extraordinarily well. And I'm pretty sure they were out in Miami with him as well, to be honest. That's the holes that I'm filling in the report that you've just given. More will come out, because unless there's camera footage, we may not see more. But I haven't even I've heard there are horrific pictures online as well, and I don't want to see them right now. It's not the right time.
I have seen them by no choice of mine. You know, you'll be watching a video, and the next thing you know, there it is. Or you're scrolling, and it pops up, and it's far too late. They're horrific. They're graphic. They're inappropriate. They're not necessary to see. These men have passed. You know that. That's enough. Don't search for them. And if you're at all of weak stomach, definitely don't look for them. The relationship between Anthony Joshua, Sina, and Latif, I believe we both would say they were close friends. Both of these men, though, did have jobs in the camp. They weren't just close friends, but I think even as evidence that they were riding in the vehicle with him as opposed to the vehicle behind him with the bodyguards and such would demonstrate that they were also more than just team members, but close personal friends. And so because Joshua is in fact Anthony Joshua, former unified two-time heavyweight champion, and the future in 2026 certainly is in question, and the prospect of what he might do is on the top of everybody's mind just 48 hours ago. I don't think it's inappropriate necessarily. If you do, then we can skip this. But I would think that there is a conversation to be had about what this may mean for his boxing future and his future just recovering from this mentally as a human being, right?
That
The
you make a
one,
very good point. You mentioned it at the beginning, Rahim, and it's a really important point. And I hadn't really even gone into verbalizing it yet. And the way the PTSD that he may feel from this, not to mention, obviously, it doesn't look as though he's got any serious injuries at the moment. But who knows? That will transpire as the days go on. You know, whether he has any vascular injuries or not. It will be, personal trainer and exercise rehab coach, these two guys, obviously, to him. But like you say, if he's taking them, his family are from Ogun State. Anthony's, if he's got these guys with him as part of his team, they're close aides, close friends. He's going to have lost two very close friends, two members of his team who are part of his mental, psychological, and spiritual scaffolding. He will have to recover from this in all those ways, as well as physically, to go again, especially as it looked like he was going to be fighting late in February, potentially in Riyadh, against names such as Rico Verhoeven, who had been mentioned, the great Dutch kickboxer. That was one of the people mentioned. It may not have been him, but I think it will take longer for Anthony Joshua to get back in the ring now. The other side of it, Rahim, is that he may feel that he wants to go in there to do something for their families, to make their names resonant, to fight in memory of his friends and his aides, and only he will know right now. And we haven't had a statement from him yet, have we? So I expect that will come in the next few days, and you just wonder whether he doesn't need to fight anymore. He doesn't have to earn money anymore. He's incredibly wealthy, generationally wealthy. He may even decide that's it. This is a sign. That's it. But he may decide it's the opposite. There's so many. I mean, this is conjecture from me now, but it will be very interesting to see what he says and how he moves from here.
What's important to me is that we, as a collective in the media, but maybe even more importantly than we who pundit class for a living and always have an opinion about everything, those who are not at this as a profession and do consume the fights and our reports and the social media of it all, look at this as a human moment. There is something to be said about the weekend on which Joshua and Jake Paul had that fight. I like to call it the Manosphere Monday after the wash, after everything that's happened. Obviously, Jake Paul and Andrew Tate, and the way that I believe social media promotes and really, in a way, misguides young men into believing that they need this kind of callous, unemotional resolve, that there is no humanity to some extent, man to man, or emotion can't be expressed without being feminine. All of those things I am worried will come to bear in the coming weeks. And as this tragedy gets a little bit further in the rear view and people start to be more irresponsible with their speculation and more interested in grabbing spotlight for themselves, that we forget that this man has the not only right, but I would say mental health responsibility to himself to work through whatever the process needs to be for him. Joshua doesn't need to fight again. You asked me 48 hours ago. I 100% want him to fight again. We all want the same fight. I'm happy to wait 3 years, if ever, for that fight, if it means that it is how long it takes for Joshua to recover in his mental health and be prepared to go into the ring, not out of, I can't feel anything, I don't have any emotion, I can just fight through this. Or, no, because you're healthy and you are able to process this loss and then come again in your whole self and put forward your best athletic abilities for the consumption of the audience. We've seen Tyson Fury take his time, sometimes healthily, sometimes unhealthily, for his mental health. He's talked about it to an extent, a great extent, I hope. And I think that Tyson is this kind of classy individual when push comes to shove, that he'll respect that as well. That this won't be ever become a needling situation, or that
Yeah.
he'll hear from his most likely opponent how important it is for him to maintain and take care of his mental health. That is something that we really, in this moment, I think, as an audience and as a profession of journalism, need to be putting forward. Whatever Joshua needs, however much time it takes, whatever his process is, allow him that.
I'm going to finish on this because I've got to go, and you make a brilliant point. I'm going to use one word: empathy. And empathy is a very important quality in what we do. We're paid to give opinions, but when life is affected, deeply affected, we have to have empathy, and it's one of the great qualities. My mentors in the sport. I remember a great sports writer for the Telegraph, Michael Calvin, always saying to me that, and the late Colin Hart, who was a great mentor, there is a moment to have empathy for who you're watching and what they do. And I think this is an empathetic moment. He will have it right now for his friends who have departed. And I think it's really important that we have it as well and understand in this very rough the rough seas of social media that, empathy is, as I say, that is the word for me in my sign off, Rahim.
If I may partner that empathy and wildly appropriate and accurate sentiment with gratitude. It's what I felt when I saw you on the screen before we even began this recording session, because I have gratitude for what you've meant to my life and career and our friendships, our rows and our best high five moments alike. My gratitude for what Joshua's meant to the sport and how he brought me to the UK for his fight, and now it is a foundational part of my life and career. I believe the audience really does, and now in Awakening in America, have gratitude for what they know Joshua to be and what they've just experienced in his excellence. Gratitude for all of our friends and family, loved ones, our co-workers alike. In this moment, it is a reminder of how quickly it can be gone and
Yeah.
how unpredictable life is. So, if anything, in addition to that empathy, is to just be grateful in the moment, to turn to the person next to you or the person in your life and give them a ring and let them know you love them, you appreciate them, you're glad to have them in your life, and be able to express that as men in particular. Be able to open up your heart and be honest about that is a really important lesson for this moment. Gareth A. Davies, I am so grateful that you took this time with us. I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon about the many things ahead. But for the moment, thank you greatly for your time, and Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Great to see you on very sad circumstances as well. Happy New Year to you, and thank you. And you've had a great year, and I will see you in 2026.